Welcome, everybody, to our special NCRMA webinar on cannabis contaminants. Contamination is a big issue in this industry and really needs the attention of all operators to understand the risks. We are very excited about our new course on that topic, and if we're up to me, I would require all operators in this industry to take the course. It is that important. Today, we have brought in one of the contributing educators that created the course, Andrew Hatch. Hey, Andrew, how are you?
Pleasure to be here, Alex. Thank you. I'm well.
All right, I'm gonna go on a little bit of your bio so everybody knows about you. Andrew has a strong background in agricultural science and 10 years of experience in cannabis research, plant pathology, plant tissue culture, and plant breeding. He served as the director of scientific operations for one of the largest vertically integrated cannabis dispensary chains in the United States. In this role, he has led a team of scientists to drive process optimization, ensure product safety, maximize yields, develop high throughput tissue culture protocols, created continuing education classes and training tools, and maintained a plant pathology lab for crop protection. Andrew is also a frequent lecturer at universities, and botanic gardens, and actively mentors students in the field of agricultural and horticultural sciences. He holds a bachelor's of science in soil and crop sciences, and plant biotechnology, genetics, and breeding from Colorado State University. I hope I got through most of that correctly.
That was correct.
All right. For more information about him and his partner, you can find at DreamLeafPartners.com. We at the NCRMA are excited about this new course, Cannabis Contaminants, through our NCRMA Academy. You can find that at ncrma.net/NCRM Academy. And so, Andrew, thank you for being here today as a contributing educator to our academy, and we are just really excited about your new course.
Of course, and thank you.
All right, so we're going to just jump into this. So, what was your goal in creating this course?
Well, I kind of want to preface all this with saying that, I love this industry. I've never been in a cooler industry with cooler people and more exciting stuff going on. But there are some gaps in product safety, not only testing, but just in processes. There aren't a lot of standards in this industry, and to avoid the industry being kind of tarnished by product liability lawsuits, really it's kind of on us to sort of make sure that the products that we are providing to the customers are safe. And so with that in mind, we decided we were going to create a course on contaminants and kind of outline in a general way what types of contaminants there are that show up in cannabis products, as well as where they come from, and kind of how to tell it when you're in over your head, so to speak.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and you're right. This industry really needed it. A lot of how it started, at least from my understanding, is really came from the food industry, and they really tried to overlay all of the food contaminant issues on this industry, which to some degree works, but to a large degree really doesn't. And so, no, I think this course is really needed, and your expertise obviously is great to really inform the operators out there. So, can you start us off by going over some of the common contaminants found in the cannabis products?
Yeah, of course. So basically, a contaminant is something that's in the product that shouldn't be there and that may be harmful to human health. And in this course, we cover the four kind of broad groups that are tested for, and that's heavy metals, residual solvents, microbials testing, and pesticides. And so it's really a broad topic that, the broadest of them is microbials, because as you said, some of these pathogens are tested for because they're implicated in foodborne illness, but others can contaminate the cannabis flower at different points of the process. A lot of the ones that they test for foodborne illness type bacteria, those come from employees rather than the actual process. Whereas some of these fungal contaminants can actually arise through the process itself. And so it makes it kind of a difficult thing to tie together. And so I think a lot more education is needed in this arena.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I know this is a broad question, but what are some of the major sources of those contaminants that these operators need to be aware of?
Well, it kind of depends. I mean, with heavy metals, you know, it's not usually something internal. It's usually something that's in the soil. It's you know, or it's already present in one of the products. So it's not something that's just kind of can just happen out of thin air. And so microbials contamination, on the other hand, can arise kind of at any time that the environment favors it, right? And so microbials contamination is typically process. You know, it all comes down to process and failures. And so identifying those critical control points is very important. With residual solvents, you know, typically those come from badly purged extracts, which is typically like an employee failure or an equipment failure, or you know, whoever wrote the protocol didn't necessarily do a great job. And then finally, we've got pesticides, which, you know, again, is kind of a broad topic. But, you know, typically pesticide contamination comes back to the operator, unfortunately. Occasionally, nearby farms can contaminate grows, but usually pesticide contamination is internal.
Okay, yeah. So what I'm hearing is most of this is operational, that they're coming up there in the process. So heavy metals can happen. So before you operate, you come in, there can be obviously contaminated soil that's there. Is that typically the issue? Is that it's a process situation?
Yeah, yeah, there are multiple components. And so the plant, actually, cannabis is a hyperaccumulator, meaning that it can take up large amounts of heavy metals from the soil very quickly. And so heavy metals contamination, if you're going to be growing outdoors, you got to test your site, because if there's heavy metals there, even in lower levels, the cannabis plant can actually accumulate them to the point where you'll fail testing. So site planning is extremely important, but also sometimes heavy metals contamination comes from fertilizers or growing media. And so testing the stuff that comes in, and, you know, having very reliable third-party vendors is extremely important.
Okay, yeah, that's great information. So what would you say the specific risks in cannabis that we have to worry about in terms of contamination? Just, you know, as because there's so many contaminant issues in really any product, but this industry is obviously has some specific issues. What would you say those are?
Well, I would say the thing that worries me the most, and maybe it's because I spent the most time with it, is microbial contamination. Because some of these fungi can have spores just floating around in the plants, and a certain proportion of all cannabis plants have these fungi floating around in them. And if the grow operation is carried out well and post-harvest operations are all, you know, very well dialed in, you know, it won't be a problem. Well, the problem is that there are little floating spores in your flower, and as soon as something in the process messes up, those spores have the time to reproduce, right? And then you've got contamination, you've got potential mycotoxins, which are left behind by the molds. You know, it gets kind of messy kind of quick.
Yeah, well, that sounds like I don't want to consume any of that. So you said mycotoxins. Can you expand on mycotoxins a little bit?
Yeah, so you know, mainly Aspergillus. Aspergillus is a genus of fungi. They're common air molds. You know, you're breathing in these spores kind of whenever you go anywhere. However, if they grow on product, they can produce these toxins just as a byproduct of their growth. And the lethal dose of these is measured in milligrams. But very much less can actually give you cancer. And so in things that are prone to these types of molds, commodities like peanuts, there's standard mycotoxin testing. But in Colorado, we only test when there is a failed batch and it's being remediated by extraction. And so there's very little actual mycotoxin testing happening here.
Wow, that's extremely concerning. And I'm thinking about all the product I have consumed in the past and what I don't know that has been in it. That's making me think quite a bit about the safety of the product that's out there.
And once again, I don't want to dissuade anyone from using cannabis. I mean, I think the benefits outweigh the risks. What really I'm trying to do here is to try to get us up to speed with other industries, like pharmaceutical industry and food, because they have very well defined safety, protocols and parameters. And so, um, if we're providing something that is a medicine, then we need to make sure that first it does no harm, right? So,
Yeah, now, and as a consumer and as an advocate for the product, I mean, that was one of the most exciting parts of legalization for me was I get to know what's in the product now, and what you're saying is that that there's a lot more things in the product that we could be looking for that could potentially cause harm. And so that, I mean, this information is just really important. And I know you go into it in the course quite deeply. And I think, like I said, I think everybody in this industry who really operates or sells or produces any of these products should just understand that. And I think this is just the next step of evolution in this industry. I think this is what the industry needs. And so again, I'm really excited about this course getting out there and educating really everybody that operates in this industry. And so, I really wanted, to ask you, so what are the states doing right now to regulate these contaminants?
all manner of stuff. So, state regulations vary so widely that I can't really go into it too much. What I can say is that California and Nevada have some of the most stringent testing requirements. Colorado requires one less test than they do, and so is kind of up there. It's got most of the bases covered. But a couple of years ago, I was in. I actually won't say what state it was, but I was in a state and I said, "Hey, what's your testing like for medical marijuana?" And he said, "Well, there are 3 labs in the state, and one of them's in a truck, and there are no testing requirements." And then I looked this year, and that same state has just as stringent as Colorado's now. So it's really kind of all over the place. Regulators don't necessarily want to ask other regulators uh, how to do their own jobs. And so also, operators don't want to talk about any problems typically. And so it creates a disconnect in the ability to make effective rules, basically.
So you're saying Nevada and California really have the highest standards, is what you're saying?
Yeah, from what I've seen.
Okay, no, that's good information. And that is really interesting how the states are. So, I mean, some of these emerging states are lagging so far behind. I mean, that's one of the most, concerning things to me. Some of these emerging states is that there's such a gap between when they start the industry to when they catch up to states like Nevada and California. Yeah, I would you. So, what would your advice be to those new emerging states that are coming on and looking at these contaminants?
I would say talk to operators. Talk to operators and talk to scientists because, it hasn't been legal to study this crop for very long. And so there's just not a whole lot known about it. And so we all kind of have to play a role in making sure that everyone is educated so that we can share information and kind of move it forward, if that makes sense. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, getting regulators together with operators to make the rules. One actually very successful company that I saw, they got equal parts tomato growers and equal parts cannabis growers, and in the first week it was unpleasant. While both sides said the other side didn't know what they were doing. However, after a couple weeks, they all got on the same page, and this facility crushes it. They were able to hybridize what's kind of standard in ag with the specialized knowledge of cannabis growers.
That's great. That's great. Um, yeah, there's education, obviously going back to this course, that's why, I'm really excited about this course, because I do believe, not even just for the regulator, I mean, for the operators, but for the regulators, I think this course really could be informative as well. Challenges of operators in this, starting up in this industry. Obviously, a lot of these operators come with deep knowledge of growing or producing the product, but obviously they don't have the knowledge of pathology and microbiology that you do. And so what would your advice be to an operator who's coming on to one of these, emerging states or just starting up in the industry?
I would say that, of course, sanitation is key. If you want to avoid microbial problems, sanitation is is paramount, and that's a pretty easy thing to accomplish. And so that's sort of your first layer. But really planning out how you're going to address product safety at the outset is really what you need to do, rather than trying to produce products and then find out there's something wrong with them and then try to go backwards and figure out what went wrong. A quality management system will help you to set those quality assurance parameters at the outset, and then on the back end, the quality control function will help you to sort of find problems in the finished product. So that between those two things, which are tied together in a quality management system, it safeguards a bit against mishaps, right? And it provides the paper trail to show that you were being proactive and that you were actually doing what you were supposed to do, rather than having a regulator show up and ask what happened and you say, well, I think I know.
You mentioned something, Andrew, and it's the quality management systems. And I've noticed in this industry that term really isn't fully understood by many, and the confusion usually is around, quality management systems. That's to make sure that I'm producing the highest potency product, right? And that's not what we're talking about here, right? Can you expand a little bit on what a quality management system is?
Sure. And so a quality management system has two main components. And the one side of it is quality assurance, and that focuses on the front end to plan out processes so that you can ensure that certain standards are met in the final finished product. And then on the back end, there's quality control, which addresses defects in the finished product, but before it's released. And so, between those two things, you've got a pretty solid system for documenting and, making sure that your processes work as planned, and being able to show, basically, if you get in trouble somewhere along the line, that you were doing all the correct things up to that point. And so, it's kind of CYA, if you'll forgive the expression, but it also helps to make sure that your quality is uniform.
And it's so important, and I really see that's the direction this industry is heading. And again, this course really touches on what that is, and how to develop a system for yourself if you're an operator. So I such an important topic. And so, I do also want to talk about when things go wrong, right? Because inevitably things are going to go wrong. And obviously they can go wrong in a lot of different ways. But
yes,
let's just touch on some of those. What would be a major sign for you when something is going wrong with contaminants and product safety?
Well, I mean, it would depend on how, if I open up a jar and I see mold, that's one way, obviously. But if I'm in a facility, it's funny, but I can smell a lot of the problems. I can kind of walk around and say, I can smell that this isn't really being kept clean, or that there's standing water, somewhere. And also the processes themselves, if I look at the protocols, I can tell, is there going to be a problem here? Like, does this make sense? Does this allow the product to stay too wet for too long? Basically, so you need somebody that understands the processes and understands what can go wrong to kind of come in and make sure that a plan is made that can fix the problems.
Yeah. So, so if an operation is failing multiple contaminant tests, that's a little too late, is what you're saying. You can figure that out beforehand.
Ideally you would, but if nothing's really ideal. And so if you end up with contamination failures that are just kind of pervasive and you can't really figure out where they're coming from, you need to act pretty quickly and find a microbiologist that can actually take the samples that you need and figure out where in the process your problem is coming from, because it's not necessarily a straightforward thing. And once you've got that, then you can make sure that not only have you solved your problem, but you've headed off problems for the future.
Yeah, that's really important. So yeah, that's great advice. So the other areas of contaminants. So if we had, I'm just thinking here, if there's, let's say, heavy metals, if we test for heavy metals, I mean, is it going to be just the soil that they're planting it in? If I mean, is that a quick solution, or can it be something much more confusing or insidious that's out there?
So, I mean, there is the potential, for heavy metal contamination coming in from places other than media and soil, but it's pretty rare.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and so the metals don't just appear. I mean, I remember one time finding uh, aluminum contamination and tracing it back to cocoa coir. That was from a region where there was a lot of bauxite mining, and so the coastal areas were contaminated with aluminum. Um,
Right.
so some of it's not straightforward. Sometimes you got to play detective a little bit.
Right. Right. Raw material sampling. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so in the other two we talked about, we have solvent, contaminants, and pesticides. I mean, both of those. I mean, in my mind, those can be controlled through through the process. Or am I wrong there?
Now, they should be able to be controlled by the process, but Murphy's Law. So for example, if you're in a region where there's a lot of ag, right, and they're spraying a lot of pesticides, and your HVAC, and you have an indoor grow, but your HVAC system isn't really set up to be able to get filter correctly those things out, then you may run the risk of failing for pesticides that you never sprayed. The weirdest story I ever heard was there was a grow that kept failing for a banned pesticide, and they weren't spraying it. It was an organic grow, and they didn't spray it, and so they actually had built the tables out of treated wood, and the the wood was getting wet, and then the pesticide was getting sucked up into the plant.
Oh wow, wow. And the real reason why we're here today is this course and the benefit of this course. And obviously, this could be informative for quite a bit of people. And so, who do you think, Andrew? I mean, if you're out there promoting this course, who do you think could benefit from this course?
Well, I think the first group would be owners and operators, because it'll make them aware of kind of the seriousness of the issue. And that's we cover a lot of territory in the course, but it goes pretty in depth, and it really talks a lot about the risk to business as well as human safety in the course of each type of contaminant. And so definitely a good resource for any owner or operator, but also any kind of cannabis nerd that wants to know more about what microbes are found in this plant, and like, how do these different types of contamination arise, and can they be remediated? So anybody that's very curious about that, I think also regulators could potentially benefit from this course, because the regulators a lot of the time are under great pressure, and they're kind of flying blind because they're not industry people, and so they have to make rules, but they don't necessarily know how to really dial them in. And so I think that's another group. And then plant science students that want to join the industry, as well as insurance people in the industry, brokers, really anybody that that has a vested interest in making sure that the products we consume are safe.
I totally agree. Yeah, anybody who wants a safe product, cannabis product, or sell it or know about it, yeah, I totally agree. I think this course can really benefit a wide variety of individuals out there. So, Andrew, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate having you, and obviously, really are grateful to have you and your partner's course in our academy. To find out more about Brian and Andrew in DreamLeaf Partners, you can go to dreamleafpartners.com. And everybody have found this webinar informative should go and take the cannabis contaminant course developed by Andrew and his partner. You can find that at ncrma.net/NCRM Academy. And you'll find all of our other courses as well. So thank you for everybody, all the listeners, for taking time out of your day to join us. Stay safe out there, everyone. Thanks. And scene. All right. All right.